presentation of the gospel and opportunity for people to come and talk to them. They do not promote themselves as individuals, as actors, but only there to present the story, in this case of Daniel. So if you ever get a chance to go, it is expensive compared to a lot of things, but it's well worth it. And another praise, just praise God for all the Christian radio stations that are around. And as we got into Eastern Pennsylvania, there was even more. I hit the search as I would get out of range of one Christian station. I would hit the search button, and 8 stops in a row landed on Christian stations, from one end of the dial to the other end of the dial. And then the next one was not a Christian station. The one after that was. I'm just amazed by that. You could find that many Christian radio stations. Didn't have to play any CDs at all. All right, here we are in the Gospel of Luke, and you thought I'd never say this, chapter 10. Luke chapter 10. This is a passage that seems pretty cut and dry, looking at it, but we'll see how quickly we go through it. First of all, let's just read the first 4 verses, which maybe not 4. Let's see. Let's go. That's first two verses. First of all, let's do that. Now after this, so it's after the things that had happened before. So after Jesus had dealt with 3 possible disciples and, indicated to them that maybe it wasn't all that they thought it would be, and there's more immediacy than what they anticipated, and after the disciples talking about how, who's the greatest, and after the transfiguration, after the feeding of the 5,000. So we've talked about a lot of things here, and that's just part of chapter 9. So after that, the Lord appointed 70 others and sent them in pairs ahead of him to every city and place where he himself was going to come. And he was saying to them, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, beseech the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. So this 70 sent is a part of verses 1 through 24 of chapter 10. And the first 2 verses have to do with them being sent and also praying. So verse 10, it says he appointed 70 others. Now, some translations say 72. And this is a lot of times when there's a variance like that, you go to the oldest manuscripts and you find out what probably the original was. In this case, there are early manuscripts for both 70 and 72. And it's difficult to ascertain which one is correct. Lightfoot tells us that a council of 72 was never heard of amongst the Jews, but once only at Jabna. I had no idea what Jabna was, so I had to look it up, try to figure out what that was. And from what I can ascertain, this was a formerly Philistine city that became the new location of the Sanhedrin following the destruction of Jerusalem by Rome. And apparently they had 72 on the council, but other indicators for the Sanhedrin at the time of Jesus was that there were 70 in the Sanhedrin. So, some commentators favor 72, some 70. It doesn't really matter too much. I lean towards 70 because that's how many elders were ordained by Moses in Numbers 11. So Jesus may be following that. There were 70 in the family of Jacob who entered Egypt. There were 70 members in the Sanhedrin, as I said, 70 men who translated the Old Testament Hebrew into Greek, the Septuagint, although some say 72 for that also. But this was what struck me the most. In the rabbinic interpretation of the Table of Nations in Genesis 10 and 11, 70 represents the nations and languages of the world. And that struck me as maybe having something to do with what Jesus is trying to accomplish here. That number would have had possible significance as Jesus is sending forth messengers into the world, because he's sending them not only into Jewish areas, but also Gentile areas. So, toss that around. I was interested to find that some early church authors gave detailed lists of the names and the subsequent places of ministry of each of the 70. But it was served little purpose here to spend time on such speculations. And there are some people on the list, I looked over the list, and some of them, really, I'm not sure that person would have been there. But anyway, so we'll skip over that. So Jesus, we're told then, sends them in pairs ahead of him to every city and place where he himself was going. You might be interested to know that the word send is the word apostello, from which we get apostle. So he apostled them. And of course, an apostle is an emissary, an ambassador. So he's sending them out as representatives of himself, in much the same way that John the Baptist came, preparing the way, because he, unlike the 12 that he sent out earlier, who were going out proclaiming the gospel to places that Jesus is not going, he's sending these guys to places he anticipates going. And so they're preparing the way for him in that way. So they are sent, and they're sent in pairs. What's the purpose in being in pairs? Well, I came up with a number of C's that I think give a good reason for pairs, and you can comment on them as we go along. First of all, for companionship. What's the value of doing something with a companion as opposed to doing it singly?
Depends on the companion. No, I'm just kidding.
What was that?
It depends on the companion.
Yeah. Yeah. I know when I was selling books door to door one summer during college, there were three of us that were stationed in the same town, and we were kind of roommates in a boarding house, and we would have breakfast together every morning and do things to encourage one another for the day. If I'd have been out there all by myself, I probably would have come home after the first week. But having those other guys there as companions really helped a lot. And cooperation. How does that fit? What's the advantage of having a companion there? For cooperation.
On ground for sure.
Okay.
My friend June and I did children's Sunday school and church for years together, and we complimented each other. I miss that so badly because she filled in where I needed and I filled in, and we just worked together so well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good example. Turn back to Ecclesiastes. Chapter 4. Yeah, there it is. Beginning with verse 9. Ecclesiastes 4:9. Let's read 9 through 12. Would somebody like to read that for us? Ecclesiastes 4:9 to 12. Barb?
Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Again, if two lie together, they keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, two will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken.
Okay, so that passage in Ecclesiastes covers a lot of these Cs. And certainly provides wisdom for us. I think an important part of this too is corroboration. What do I mean by that?
Put together, same.
Yeah, but for a particular purpose. What's the purpose in having corroboration?
One goal, it's a one goal.
No, I'm not sure if what you're thinking of exactly there. There's,
It's the truth.
yeah,
You corroborate something, I said this, and you say the same thing.
yeah. And what's the Old Testament standard? Two witnesses verifies truth. So just one guy coming along and saying, hey, the Messiah is coming. Oh, yeah, you and who else? Well, my buddy here. Oh, okay. Well, then we're more likely to believe it because there's two of you at least that are saying and not just one nutty person. So corroboration, comfort. How does that fit in to having a pair?
Dear. Again. Well, when you fail, you have someone to help you and comfort when people revile you, because I'm sure not everybody takes everything. You
Yeah.
know, everywhere they went, they weren't welcomed with open arms and
Mhm.
it just helps.
Yeah. And counsel. Yeah, Jeff.
If you forget the words that you want to say, the other person will help you out.
Okay, yeah.
Sometimes it's easy when you're by yourself and talk, those of us who talk to ourselves in our head. It's easy to sometimes your emotions or whatever, you get down or whatever, and you start thinking the wrong way instead of keeping the focus on the Lord and trusting him, and you just can kind of get off track.
Yeah. Anything else? There's a lot that could be said about counsel. Kind of going along with what Barb said, the decision making. Should we go to this town, that town, this street, that street? All right, so a lot of reasons for them being in pairs. Albert Barnes has an interesting point to make. He says every Christian, and especially every Christian minister, needs such a friend and should seek someone to whom he can unbosom himself and with whom he can mingle his feelings and prayers. I remember when I did my pastoral internship at a church up in Erie, the pastor's wife met with Beth a few times. And one of those times she told Beth that a pastor's wife can't have any friends. Because you might offend somebody or whatever, she said. And Beth said, Beth thought, I'm not going to live like that. No, maybe more than anybody, a pastor's wife needs friends. All right, so pairs are important. It says that he was sending them where he himself was going to come. I wish that they had, at least NASB says it that way. Well, first of all, let's say NASB does it right by saying he himself, in the sense that the word he, as we talked about before, when the pronoun is actually put there, it's for emphasis. So it's not just he was going to come, but he himself is emphasizing him coming. But there's a word that's kind of not translated in NASB that I wish was there, and maybe some of your translations have it. Really, it should say he himself was about to come. Any translations have that, about to come? The ESV
It's about to go.
is about to go. Right, so what's the difference between he was going to and he's about to?
He wasn't there yet. He was going as they prepared the way, like John the Baptist.
Well, what is about to add to that?
Sounds more imminent.
Yeah, so he was going to come could be 10 years from now. But he's about to come indicates an immediacy, doesn't it? Yeah, and that's the Greek word mellow. Which is real important, I think, in the New Testament, because we see it used here and in other places that we'll come to. So he's about to come. He's going out there. Now, where he's sending them, presumably would include, as we look at how he is going to Jerusalem, both Samaritan and Gentile villages. And this is a temporary appointment, as you'll see by the instructions that he gives them. So he is about to come there and he sends out these workers. Now, there's hardly an occasion in which I'm a discussion with a fellow believer concerning the doctrine of election when the question arises. In fact, just happened just a couple of days ago. Why evangelize if God has chosen who will be saved? Why evangelize? Well, the answer in part can be ascertained here as we see the means by which the message of Messiah is to be communicated. There's no doubt as we look further in the passage that Jesus believed in the doctrine of election, but he is sending people out to communicate the message. Jesus sent out ambassadors to carry the good news to every city and place where he himself was going. That's God's plan. That's the way he brings about the calling of the elect. And he was saying to them, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, beseech. I wish the NASB hadn't used the word beseech. That's such an archaic word that we don't use anymore. What's ESV say? Pray earnestly. Yeah, that's better. Or beg would be another good word there. The Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. So beg the Lord of the harvest. Now, we can't take everything that Jesus says to his disciples and apply it to us. And I wouldn't, say necessarily that he intends for us to necessarily embrace everything that he tells the disciples here. But certainly is within the spirit of Jesus and God himself that we follow this injunction. It would seem to me that it would be incumbent upon us, since God desires the salvation of those that he's calling to himself and desires to use people to accomplish that, that he also desires for us to pray to him to send laborers into his harvest. And I admit to you, I do not do that as I should, and maybe be an encouragement to you to pray that the Lord would send laborers into the harvest. Even as we're walking down the street, driving down the highway and seeing people that do not know the Lord, to pray, Lord, send people their way. We think of people in countries, you see things on the news. Lord, send people their way. Yeah, John?
I think that's a more important point than what we sometimes give it. Because if you don't pray for God to do it, then you're praying that you do it. That's the antithesis of it. You're not asking God to prepare the hearts, the minds, the souls to receive the message. And you're saying the responsibility lies with me to get out there and do it. Huge difference. One, God's doing it and you're being the proclaimer. The other, you're doing it and telling people what to do.
Or the third alternative, we don't seem to care.
Well, that's the empathetic view. That's always the opposite, the antithesis. The argument.
Yeah.
But the fact is it's an important part. Once you decide to do it, it's how you're doing it.
And what are you to beg the Lord of the harvest to do? And notice who the Lord of the harvest. He's in charge of the harvest. It goes along with what John is saying. He's the one that is in control of the harvest. It's not us. But we're asking him to send out laborers. the word to send out here really is a word of command. It's a word of, it literally means to throw out, to throw out laborers, to drive them. One commentator says the Greek is much more forcible. It is that he would push them forward and thrust them out. It is the same word which is used for the expulsion of a devil from a man possessed. It takes great power to drive a devil out. It will need equal power from God to drive a minister out to his work. I think it was Spurgeon said that. He also said this: can you picture the distress of a farmer when he sees his fields golden with harvest and there are no servants to gather that harvest in? It was such an agony that filled the heart of Jesus as he looked out on his harvest field. So pray that the Lord would send out laborers into his harvest. Any other comments about verse 2?
Bill?
Yeah.
Kathy Orr shared with me that Lyle was just had such a heart, for people. So she said she told me one particular time, and she said this happened all the time. They were in a city and they're walking down the sidewalk, and suddenly she turns to talk to him and he's not there. And so she turns around, and here was a man who had been sitting on the sidewalk with his back up against the building, very distraught or poor, and there he went, and he sat down right with him and shared the gospel with him. And he was a great servant of the Lord in that area. He had a heart for people, and he would stop anywhere. And when he saw somebody who felt needed the Lord and wasn't mean.
Yeah. I'm so envious of people that are able to do that much better than I.
The good point there is the very first phrase, right? The harvest is plentiful.
Mhm.
So, God has people that he wants to hear the message.
Mhm.
There's almost some level of a guarantee of success because God's the Lord of the harvest, and he's got a harvest, and it's plentiful, and there are people that need to get saved, and you just need to get out there and be a laborer. And
Yeah.
It's not about us. It's not about we're doing all the work. The harvest is plentiful, but God is doing his work.
And he's just sending us out to reap what he has already sown. And
Exactly.
That's an important point. When he asks you to work, he's already done this.
And he has a purpose. I think of those occasions when missionaries went to places and were not successful for quite some time, but God was still doing his work because they were paving the way for other missionaries that would come later, and laying the groundwork. They're just as much of the harvest as the person who sees people coming to Christ. All right, so in verse 3, danger, Will Robinson. He says, go. Just one simple word, go. And then he says, behold, pay attention, I send you out as lambs in the midst of wolves. So first of all, we notice, having commanded them to pray for laborers, Jesus next commands them to be the answer to their prayers. Okay, pray for laborers. Okay, now you be the laborers. But the second thing is, I send you out as lambs in the midst of wolves. Great send-off, Jesus. Okay, we're gonna be the laborers and now we're gonna be lambs in the midst of wolves. And we certainly have to be aware that that's always a possibility, no matter where we're ministering, even here in the good old US of A. That there's going to be opposition. And you think of so many missionaries that have gone into cultures that were dangerous, in which they can be killed, and many have been killed for spreading the gospel from the time of the apostles up to the present day. So it's always with the possibility that if we go to communicate the gospel, that there may be hostility. Okay, I don't have a lot to say about that. We all know these things. Any other comments?
I think it's important sometimes to make sure that you do set the expectations of what you're going to face rather than sugarcoat it.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, John.
I think he was conveying the message. If you are rejecting, don't be deterred,
Mm-hmm,
keep going,
mm-hmm.
don't be deterred.
Yeah. Because I mean, so often, especially when a person first comes to Christ, they think everybody would love to hear that message. And it's not always true, is it? Yeah, Jim?
I was listening to something this morning on the news. And they've been commenting, about all the things where they're trying to stop Christian messages going out in any way, shape, or form. And then this morning, they were, I don't know, it was Auburn University or where, and they were having this huge baptismal service of people that have come to Christ. So here they're not accepting, and here they are. So we might go out and think, oh, this is useless, nothing's happening. You turn around over here and it is happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. All right, so following the danger, we're going to see some things by which they're not to be distracted. It's already been mentioned a little bit here, but we'll go little by little through what Jesus points out. First of all, they're not to be distracted by material things. He says, carry no money belt, no bag, no shoes. Now, because this is very similar to what we covered at the very beginning of chapter 9, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. The first term, whatever you have there, is talking about a money belt, something in which you carry money, a money bag, whatever. The next word, which NASB translates bag, is like a knapsack. We might think of a backpack. So he says, don't take a money bag, don't take a backpack, and don't take any shoes. Does that mean you're going barefoot? No, what we said before in chapter 9 was just don't take an extra pair of shoes. So don't take anything as if this is going to be a long-term experience. This is only a temporary thing. And you're not to be dependent on yourself, or your own material things, is the message there. Okay, any comment on the first part of verse 4?
Why does it say greet no man by the way?
Okay, that's the next part of verse 4, which we'll go to right now. So don't say hi to anybody. That's not very friendly, is it? Well, the greeting in that culture was not just being friendly and saying hi. A greeting in that particular circumstance, as one person said, could be tedious and complicated, consisting of many embraces and inclinations and even prostrations of the body on the ground. So the peril of such wayside salutations, says A.T. Robertson, was, as he says, palaver and delay. The king's business required haste. So in other words, what Jesus is saying is don't dawdle or mess around with all the cultural expectations of spending hours talking to somebody on the road, asking about their family and what's going on in there and giving them advice. And, that's what a greeting was then. It wasn't just saying hi. In fact, back in 2 Kings, the same advice is given by Elisha to Gehazi. I'll just read it for you, so you won't take time to turn back there. 2 Kings 4:29. Elisha said to Gehazi, as he's sending him on an errand, tuck your mantle under your belt, take my staff with you, and go. If you meet anyone, don't stop to greet him. And if a man greets you, don't answer him. Then place my staff on the boy's face. This is when the boy had died, and Gehazi is going ahead to lay the staff on the boy. In Thompson's work entitled Land and Book, he relates the following. These instructions were also intended to reprove another propensity which an Oriental can hardly resist. By Oriental, I mean somebody living in Asia, which Israel is part of Asia, technically. If he meets an acquaintance, he must stop and make an endless number of inquiries and answer as many. If they come upon men making a bargain or discussing any other matter, they must pause and intrude their own ideas and enter keenly into the business, though in no wise concerns them. And more especially, an Oriental can never resist the temptation to assist when accounts are being settled or money counted out. The clink of coin has a positive fascination to them. Unquote. Now, according to Lightfoot, this was not an unusual expectation. For example, those who were mourning for the dead were not to salute any person for the first 7 days of his mourning. If 13 fasts had been proclaimed by the Sanhedrin to beg for rain, and rain had not come, there were several activities from which people were to abstain: conducting business, building, planting, becoming engaged or marrying, and greeting one another. So in other words, it was so serious that there's no rain, and 13 fasts had not prevailed upon God to bring rain, that one of the things they were to abstain from as kind of a mourning was greeting one another. With this in mind, it may be understood that Jesus desires his ambassadors to be seen as those who are proclaiming a message that was very serious, since they would be understood to be mourners wherever they went. Okay, any other comments then about greeting? Okay, I think we have time to do one more. And I'm calling that not distracted by accommodations, verses 5 and 6. Whatever house you enter first, say, peace be to this house. And that's the normal greeting when entering a house. Shalom, peace. If a man of peace is there, literally a son of peace, which is a Hebraism, meaning a person who is inclined to peace, someone who is peaceful. So if a person there is peaceful, and we might say, understand that as being receptive to you and your message, your peace will rest on him. So if he is peaceful toward you, then your peace will rest on him. He'll continue to have peace, but if not, it will return to you. So the peace you're giving him is going to return to you, which means he won't have peace. All right. Any comments about that particular verses 5 and 6? Similar to what he told the disciples earlier in chapter 9. Okay, we can do one more here. Next, not distracted by food laws. And stay in that house, eating and drinking what they give you. Eating and drinking what they give you. Now, why does he say that? Well, if you've talked to missionaries, they'll tell you that oftentimes they have to eat things that maybe they don't want to, just so that they don't offend their host. And there's some of that here. But I think in the context of the culture in which these people live, these are Jewish disciples going out into Samaritan and Gentile areas where the food may not be kosher. The Jewish people were given a long list of things to avoid. And one of them was avoiding food offered by a Gentile or a Samaritan. And Jesus is basically kind of giving us a precursor of what Peter would experience with the sheet let down from heaven, is don't call anything unclean That's not the goal here. You eat whatever they give you as a provision of God. It wasn't like there would be anything like eating worms or anything distasteful. It was food that would be considered unclean by the Jewish people. Does that make sense?
Mr. Warren had his little Warrenisms, and one of his was, where they lead me, I will follow, what they feed me, I will swallow.
Yeah.
Pastor, it doesn't matter if that's the worst meal you've ever had in your life, you're enjoying that meal when you're with their place.
And if they expect you to burp to show satisfaction, you burp.
Yeah. The sacrifices made. I'm gonna head out, but Brandy actually came here this morning.
Oh,
So
good.
I really encouraged her.
Good.
And so she said her mom would want her to be here,
Wow.
that's for sure, so that's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. All right, there are two more parts to verse 7, but it'll take us over to do that. So we'll jump back into the middle of verse 7 next time and see what other distractions are not to prohibit these disciples from going out with the message. What? Oh. Yeah. A week from tonight, we're going to be starting the Reformation. So I think some of you certainly would be interested in that, seeing what came about first among the pre-reformers and then the reformers, because without them, we wouldn't be where we are today.